I had never experienced a feeling like this before, ever in my whole life. It was physical, but not. It was inside of me, but also that didn't make sense. And it was so new that I couldn't judge it. I could only sit with that feeling and just notice and pay attention. And that slow whirling went around and over to my shoulder, and it took a pause, again, almost like on the inside of my body. And then it traveled down my arm and into my hand. And then I just knew this went into my dad too. I knew it. And I had such a sense of peace and overwhelming love come over me, and a knowing in the very depths of me, we are eternally bonded and everything is fine.
Welcome, Amber. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. For those who are watching, can you start out with a little bit about your background and then what life was like before the work that you're currently doing?
Sure. Well, I am an evidential medium and really a 20-year-long classroom teacher, although I'm now no longer teaching as I'm really working in the evidential, well, just in the mediumship and spiritual growth space, as well as end of life coaching. I'm a wife and a mom, and really you're a very average, everyday person. Although obviously the birth of the mediumship for me was really a very unexpected result of my dad's passing in 2020.
Yeah, that was a very beautiful experience from what I've seen. Could you take us through that? Because you had a shared with the experience, but even after that experience, you've been communicating, and can you go into that for us?
Sure. Well, my dad passed from cancer on November 1st of 2020, and that was obviously about a year-long journey of, his terminal illness and eventual passing. And very unexpectedly, I had what we call a shared death experience with him, about 12 hours before he actually took his last breath. I had never heard of the term shared death experience before. Many of us hear the term near-death experiences. Pretty much everyone has an idea of what that is. A shared death experience is when someone has a transcendent experience during someone's passing that isn't really logical or just explainable away. Sometimes those include, because I also kind of do some volunteer work and shared death researching with a nonprofit. Sometimes shared death experiences give someone a glimpse of what the person is actually experiencing as they're passing, where almost it's like they're accompanying them, but not. Um, they often include validations remotely. For example, maybe being on a plane and somehow you just have this felt presence of your dear loved one and you perceive a message and you just know that they passed. Maybe even without explanation because they weren't even sick. And then you land and you find out this person did indeed pass at that time. It's a moment of connection and transcendence that defies explanation. And for me, in my shared death experience, I did know my dad was passing. I was with him, of course, the week leading up to his passing. And we had already had our last conversation. He was completely unconscious, so was never going to kind of speak again, all of that kind of stuff. And he passed at home. We had a hospice bed brought into the house, and I was sort of laying alongside him in a recliner, holding his hand. And I was just having a moment of real presence, meaning I really was trying to be absent of thought because the thinking was painful, thinking about, I'm never going to hear my dad's voice again. He's never going to see my son learn how to ride a bike, all that kind of stuff. Those are painful thoughts. And so instead, I just stopped thinking and I just was focused in presence on the love that I felt for my dad and holding his hand. And in that moment of real presence, I experienced just what was sort of otherworldly. I suddenly saw hues of purple kind of swirling in my mind's eye. Not that I had any. interesting thoughts about that. I just sort of noticed it and it was just sort of odd. And then I felt a warmth kind of encompass me, starting at the top of my head all the way to my toes. And I remember thinking, oh, the sun must be coming in the window and just kind of, playing tricks on me. But then I had a sense that I can only describe as a force. It was like wind, but not because it wasn't exactly physical and it wasn't on my skin, but I felt this whoosh come right in the back of me and right into my chest space and what I would now call my heart center, even though I never used words like that at this time. And it was such a felt sense of whoosh. And I don't know, I don't even have the vocabulary to describe the sense of presence that was just contained within me. But then this kind of spaciousness, if you will, this force started doing slow circles just like this around what I would now call my heart center. I had never experienced a feeling like this before, ever in my whole life. It was physical, but not. It was inside of me, but also that didn't make sense. And it was so new that I couldn't judge it. I could only sit with that feeling and just notice and pay attention. And that slow swirling kind of went around and over to my shoulder, and it took a pause, again, almost like on the inside of my body. And then it traveled down my arm and into my hand. And then I just knew this went into my dad too. I knew it. And I had such a sense of peace and overwhelming love come over me and a knowing in the very depths of me. We are eternally bonded and everything is fine. Everything is fine and all is well. And we are eternally bonded. And it was such a deep truth that I didn't even care what it meant. Because probably as I say that out loud, if I were analyzing it, my brain would start thinking, well, what does that mean we're eternally bonded? He's dying. I'm never going to talk to him again. I didn't need an explanation. It was just the truth. And I gave him a huge hug. And even though physically it's like he couldn't hear me, but somehow I just absolutely knew he could hear me. And I said, Dad, I don't know what that was, but I know you felt it too. And you take all that love and light in you that's in your core. Words I didn't really use at that time. I wasn't really a love and light kind of person. I don't even know where that came from. And it's okay to go. Don't take the old news with you. Just take all that love in your core. And I, again, just gave him this big hug, and it was just so beautiful. And I needed to leave the house. I had promised my family that I would spend some time with them, my own family, because I had been away for a week. And when I left the house, I found myself elated. I had the windows down on the way home and I was singing and just blasting the music. And I remember thinking, what is wrong with me? Why do I feel so elated? Because it didn't make any sense. But it was just so beautiful. And I didn't know exactly what I experienced, but I just knew it was so deeply true and that everything was fine. My dad did pass away in the middle of the night that night, so, 12 hours later after that. Now, looking back, I know from all of my evidential mediumship experiences, communication with him, my meditations, that moment, that shared death moment, that was him. That's really when his soul transitioned. We often in our human form think of dying as we're in our body until the breathing stops. It is super not that way. There is a whole lot of transition going on around the time of our passing. And I know that that was my dad. It was him giving me that experience in his soul form, him letting me know we're eternally bonded. And how did that show up? Well, the very next morning, after he passed, I just wanted to decompress. I wasn't even in heavy grief, but I wanted to just decompress. It was an emotional week. And I went to a park where I like to walk. and I pulled in my parking space and I did let some tears go. And the tears were just all that I had just experienced over the course of the week. And as I was letting those tears go, I heard his actual voice in my mind. His actual voice, not in the car, but in my own mind. And the voice said, Amby, that was his nickname for me, get out of the car. You've cried enough tears over me in your life. And I thought to myself, wow, that's true. I have cried enough tears over my dad in my life. But also, where's that voice coming from? And I just assumed I was making it up in my head somehow. But I got out of the car, I started walking, and I didn't think I was talking to my dad. I just kind of said to myself, gee, Dad, I hope you're all right. Because in that time, I wasn't really sure exactly what was next, in the beyond. I had some ideas, but also I didn't a lot of my faith background, it was that I grew up with was there, but it wasn't exactly the same, and I wasn't really sure what's next for all of us. That was my way of just kind of expressing. I don't really know. Where are you? Where are we? Where do we go? But as soon as I said that, gee, Dad, I hope you're all right. Without a moment hesitation, his voice was right there in my actual mind. And his voice said, I'm just fine, Amby. I'm going to stick around here a while and help some people. And I'm happy about it. And in that moment, I actually stopped walking because, unlike in the car, I had a thought to myself, which was, if I, as Amber, were making up that voice in response to that, that is not what I would have said. If I were making it up, I would have said, Amber, I'm in heaven. It's so beautiful. My dog, Thunder, is here. I got to see my granddad again, just like I told you that's who I wanted to see. Um, I would have never come up with something like, I'm going to stick around here a while and help some people. It's not that I immediately believed, oh, I'm hearing from my dad because I like science. This doesn't make any sense. But at the same time, I had this just internal tug. That wasn't me. So what was that? And it kind of started a path of just curiosity to me, and coupled with the vulnerability of just the rawness of a dear loved one's passing, it kind of broke my heart open. And I mean that in all the right ways. I don't mean it in the grief, sadness way. I mean it in the fully present, vulnerable, just love way. Um, and that really ignited a year-long journey with my dad in spirit, guided by him, really showing me the greater reality of which we all are a part.
Oh, that's a beautiful story, and experience. It kind of reminds me, like I had a little, I was working in an addiction clinic, and when you were talking about the whooshing, I had that sensation. There was a pregnant woman who was going into the facility to get clean. She was pregnant, but no, we didn't know at the time that she was pregnant. But I sensed it was like this scent of a baby powder, and then this whooshing of an energy or something of force, kind of like you say. It's really interesting that they have that ability from the other side to connect with us on different levels.
The ability is absolutely, I'm going to say here, not even there.
Yeah.
There is a part of our reality that maybe our brains have just sort of been conditioned to be closed off to. But it's not sprinkled magic dust on certain people. Yes, I was given a gift of grace. There is something to that. I used to ask myself all the time in those initial months because what I was experiencing was incomprehensible. And I would constantly ask, what is the science that is fostering this? Because I like science. I like understanding the world from, that logical, here's what we can know and prove mentality. But what I had learned with time was that actually it's not just science, meaning, yes, I do think there is an aspect that is the nature of reality that allows us to have this type of communion. That's why it's not magic fairy dust. But at the same time, there are acts of grace we are not in control as much as we think we are to the web of life.
Hmm. Yeah. I've seen that through manifestations. Like, I'm like, okay, I didn't manifest this. So
Yeah,
why am I being directed into this place or this thing or this experience?
sure.
So there's definitely a greater happening, and guidance. So now I kind of went through a similar experience, with the father figure in my life. He abandoned us when we were children, but when he had passed, it was really interesting because somebody referred to him in a different way, and I didn't know that's who they were talking about. And obviously, we weren't close or anything because we haven't really known each other. But as soon as he had passed, it was like a week or two later that he came in, and I just knew it was him. It's like there's this knowing that it's them, right? And it was really interesting. All these emotions came up, and he came in to apologize, and so I heard dialogue. So we is it more telepathy, do you think, or is it our innate abilities? How do you think that is?
Well, I think that they are, I think all of us all of us have this innate ability to perceive our loved ones. And the reason why is because we aren't just this human body. And that is true for every single one of us. We are a part of the very force of life or the very force of the essence that created everything. There is an aspect to us in there in which we are all connected. And so, because that is a part of our innateness, we can grow our awareness of what's happening in our larger consciousness. It's not so much how I feel it that, someone in spirit is exactly putting something in my brain, and I just happen to be gifted with the ability to perceive it. It's more that I recognize my inner nature. Someone that's in spirit is already completely in their essence of their inner nature, and it's in that space that we can commune. And so when we are able to sort of quiet the mind, which doesn't really necessarily have to mean having a completely blank mind experience. That's hard for many people. But it is a calming of the mind and really being embodied in our heart, in our love, in our gratitude, in our internal upliftment. That's where our loved ones are. They're in that unbounded state. They're not in a place. They're right here. It's just in our human body, we're like this. And when we pass, we just become this. We become unbounded. So, in our human body, we may not be able to entirely unbound ourselves, but we can grow our awareness enough, coupled with calming down our mind, to get in that space where we can perceive. And that's going to happen for each of us in the way that is best suited for us. You don't even have to be trying for some of this to occur. It's simply, do you recognize it? So, for example, many of us recognize when our loved ones pass things like all of a sudden the lights are flickering, they never do that. Or maybe you could have sworn you put this book or key or whatever it is, you put it here. And somehow when you walk in the door, now it's over here. And it's like, it. I did not put that there. Of course, we see things like, feathers or signs being in front of us. I got that all the time. Right when my dad died, all of a sudden I was constantly finding feathers everywhere, not looking for them. I mean, I'd literally walk in the door and there's 10 little tiny baby feathers just on the floor. And again, prior to all my experiences, we all know we hear things like that, right? Like people leaving feathers and coins. And I would think, okay, well, that's just fanciful. It's not that I just I like science. What do you mean? All of a sudden someone can put feathers in the path. But anything really is possible. Anything is possible with consciousness. And so when we're originally recognizing things like physical signs, the reason for that is because that's what's going to work for our brain to recognize. Loved ones in spirit are going to use where our abilities are in order to be able to perceive them. If we trust and we acknowledge, oh, I recognize these as signs, then we can grow in opening up our perception so that maybe now we can experience a felt presence. And that's sort of the path that happened for me. First, it was just physical signs, things that had no explanation. Then it became, oh, I feel my dad. And my brain would say, well, that's not possible. I have to be making this up. Um, but I would have these very felt moments where I just absolutely knew he was here, and it almost felt like there's a pressure change in the air around me. That would get validated because I would say, Dad, if you're really here, I need a sign. And then I would get a sign. As an example, we had an agreed upon sign of a deer. We had a beautiful moment just before he passed in the last days, and we kind of came to this deer as an agreed upon sign. And in one moment on a walk, I was having this felt present experience, and he had told me in that last conversation, the deer will be directly in your walking path. You'll know in your eyes, in its eyes. And I was having this moment of felt presence, and I had my head in my hands like this, and I was saying, Dad, I really feel you. I think you're here a lot, but I need a sign about now. And I picked my head up and to stand up off my bench and start, heading down my walk again. And right there, I didn't even have to take two steps. All of a sudden, there was this big buck right in my direct walking path, just staring at me. Now, I live in Michigan. There are quite a few deer. It's not that it's unheard of to see a deer, but it's that it was right in the moment when I asked for it. And it was a huge buck. A buck would normally run off, especially when it sees you. And, it was maybe 100 feet from me, but it just stood there. I actually started walking toward it before it finally kind of, ran away. And because that was our agreed upon sign, I saw that as confirmation. However, at the same time, as soon as you get that heartburst of love, I know this is you. Thank you for the sign. 4 hours later, my brain activates. That had to be coincidence. I'm sure a whole lot of you can relate to that. This is the dance between the heart and the brain. But eventually, you just have to let the love in. You have to let the love in. And when you do, your whole world can open up for you.
Yeah. And I think that there's a lot of fear around that though, because who is it? Who is it that's talking to me, or who is it that's sending these messages? So I think that can keep us guarded and the fear
Yeah,
of letting it in.
yes, that's a very good point. And I think the other place the fear comes from is that when it's really showing itself like this to you, it can remind your brain, you're not in control of everything. And our ego does not like that. That's what our ego is built on. And it's a good mechanism, right? It helps us survive. It helps us navigate the world because it interprets reality as X, Y, and Z. But guess what? Reality is not just X, Y, and Z. And your brain's not going to like that very much. Um, but that's a part of someone who's on a real spiritual growth journey. That's a big part of the journey is letting go of the fear. It's not about being gullible, but it is letting go of the fear, knowing you are loved, and being open to being guided.
Mhm. Yeah, because I know for me, it's like I can sense when something doesn't feel right or if it doesn't feel good. And so it's also, I think, tuning into that and not letting the fear overtake us, just tune into the energy, see where it's coming from, what is it? Because we have the ability to utilize that, you
Yeah.
know,
Yep. That
sensing.
makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, but also like with the fear, as you were saying the ego, I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe the ego is sensing that, okay, yeah, there's something more beyond the ego itself recognizing that, and that's where the fear comes from. Okay, there's more than here than what I am. So to
Yeah,
experience that and to
yeah,
just let that go and just to be present with it can help, I think, navigate through the fear.
yeah. And being playful. You have to be willing to play in the vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then, and in that way you can kind of test yourself a little. So if you experience something that you think is a sign, or maybe you have a thought, and it might even be in your own voice, but the thought, there's just something about it that it doesn't seem like this came from me. You can always kind of play with that and ask, okay, if this didn't really come from me, if I didn't really make this up, this isn't my imagination. What's something that I'm going to see in the next day or so? Just kind of ask it in your own heart space. Maybe you'll get an image, maybe you'll get a thought in your mind. Um, Maybe you'll just have some type of knowing, but just be open to what comes to you as you ask that in any way, shape, or form, and then watch for that in the days ahead. It's a great way to start validating your experiences and building trust in that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, beautiful. Now, how long did it take you to let people know that you were going to be doing mediumship? Could you do mediumship? Like, did you have, what was your journey like to the mediumship?
Well, it kind of unfolded on its own. Of course, it's sort of like every time that I believed something that was happening with my dad, something new would open up. And this is again why I understand now. There's some gifts of grace to this. I was being guided. Um, so as I believed I was experiencing him through signs, simultaneously I started, reading because I was trying to figure out what the heck is going on with me. What's happening? I didn't understand it. And of course I tried to look in academics first, and I didn't really find a lot of help. At the time, I didn't know about organizations like the International Association of Near-Death Studies. So I read a couple of books by mediums, just trying to kind of match up my experiences. And while my experiences in the time were not in connecting with other people's loved ones, it was just my dad, the what was happening was really lining up with people's mediumship experiences. So just like how you talked about getting this smell, I think you said it was like a baby scent smell.
Mm-hmm.
I would experience things like that. Like all of a sudden I would smell my dad's like leather. It's funny because people sometimes would say he smelled like leather, and he kind of did. And I would have these experiences, and I didn't know, why am I all of a sudden smelling? Or his smoke. He did smoke for quite most of his life, not all of his life, but most. And all of a sudden, I would just completely smell just like if he was right here having a cigarette, and no one in my house smokes. So I didn't understand why I was having these types of energetic. Now I know they're energetic experiences, but I would read books by mediums. As I was doing that, I kept hearing over and over, meditation is kind of the key to opening up this more collaborative communication. So I decided to kind of try a meditating practice just to see what would happen. And woo, the lid blew off. So as I started to do that, then I was no longer just having some type of awareness of him. I actually started experiencing him in my space, almost like conversations in a way. He would tell me things that I couldn't possibly logically know. For example, in one moment, I was actually in the middle of a work project. I wasn't even thinking about him. I was working. But by now, it was maybe 4 months after his passing, I would recognize when I had a felt presence of him, and I had been in my meditation journey. So I could pause my work project and just really get in my heart for a second and kind of just tune in. And then I heard his voice, and his voice said, "Call your mom. She's sad and eating pudding right now." Well, I was afraid to call her because what if she's not eating pudding? What if all of this is made up? What if I'm inventing all of this and then I'm going to be so embarrassed and I feel crazy? And so I decided not to call her. I was too afraid. And I actually felt, meaning in me as an emotion, which is how mediumship works, my dad's non-judgmental disappointment. I felt it. It was like he was disappointed, but also not judging me for it. But that disappointment gave me the courage to pick up the phone and call her. And I did. And you know what? She was crying. And guess what? She was eating pudding. And it was because something in the house had just broken that my dad would normally deal with and fix. And it was just bringing her a bunch of grief. And so, as I told her what was happening, it brought her so much joy. And it's like she knew in that moment, there is no way that you could have known this. I haven't seen my mom eating pudding since I was a kid. She had some like in the back of the cupboard and just decided to make it. Well, what do we do with women when we have a sad moment? We try to look for some chocolate. And it was moments like these that were growing my sort of mediumship abilities, even though that wasn't my intent. But as I was having these now more collaborative, communicative experiences, I also started experiencing other people's loved ones. For example, I'd be in the grocery store and just going about my normal life, checking out my groceries, and all of a sudden I have a felt presence of a woman, and I just somehow know. I don't even know why I know, I just know she's in her 50s. And then I could feel in my own chest like a type of real severe congestion, and I knew she passed of emphysema. Mediumship is so fascinating because you actually get these physical experiences momentarily, which is scientifically fascinating to me because clearly I don't have emphysema. So, probably if my lungs were scanned, I have no type of congestion, but somehow I'm actually feeling the congestion momentarily. And I had that knowing this is a woman in her 50s. She died of emphysema. And I knew it's the mother of the woman behind me. And in this stage, I was so just exploring what's happening, what's going on. And I got, would have a lot of courage. And I turned to her and I said, I'm sorry, I have to ask you something. Do you have a mom who passed in her 50s of emphysema? And she looked at me and said, Do you know my mother? And I think we were both just kind of in awe. And all I could do was explain to her, I'm so sorry. My dad died recently, and I'm having all these interesting experiences where I have felt moments of feeling people. And I had this knowing in this moment, and I'm sorry. I needed to ask you because those things were very validating for me that what I'm experiencing is real. And then they started happening with people, loved ones of people in my sphere where they were actually giving me a message for their loved one. Um, and so it was sort of this slow growth into mediumship. I didn't want to be a medium. And that's also why, looking back, it's like I could laugh about it. It's funny because I could see how they slow walked me into this. They know I'm curious. They know I'm a curious person who likes to understand how the world works. And so they slow walked me into mediumship. And by the time I got to the place where I found this so fascinating, because now I'm getting messages for people in my sphere and their loved ones, I said I have to learn what the heck is mediumship. And so I took a class with Suzanne Giesemann, who's an extremely well-known and highly respected medium here in the US. And as I took her class, it just by the end of that class, I was a medium. Not that I had the confidence in it or fully identified with it. That was a journey in and of itself to be able to identify as a medium and be okay with that. And that took a whole nother year. But now I fully embrace this path. It's very evidence-based for me because not only do I want to express the heartfelt messages and support and love and care from people in spirit, but I want to help people understand that there's so much more to this life and life that's right here, a part of who we are. And so it was quite a journey for me to come to that state of acceptance.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's definitely a journey. I channel information, and I think that kind of puts me open to receiving information, in that way as well. Like when I had my father come in and the baby. Um, so I wanted, and for whatever reason, this is coming up, and feel free to answer the question or go in this direction if you like, or not. Just let me know. But as I'm sitting here, it's like, okay, my experience of knowing like a precog of people who are going to pass, and then next thing you know, they're pass. So do you tell them, or do you just not tell them? Like you being a medium, how would you approach that?
Well, one, I have not entirely had that experience. And maybe because I don't want that. I don't want to know those things. I feel it's not my responsibility. It's a very heavy thing to tell somebody. So for me, that just wouldn't be something that would feel okay for me to do or have the integrity to do. I have not, to be honest with you, experienced that type of precognition. At that being said, sometimes in mediumship sessions, I do absolutely experience what we can call psychic things about someone. And out of integrity, I always say, this isn't coming from someone in spirit. I can just tell. It's like I'm picking it up in your own energy field. But I think sometimes there are things we have to be careful, and just in my opinion, with so-called psychic work because we can definitely perceive, I think what we're really perceiving in psychic work is what is in all the realms of potentiality and possibility. And sometimes things will feel very solid. So, for example, one time in a mediumship session, I had this very strong, soon felt knowing that my client was going to have another baby and it would be a girl. And again, those types of things I would normally be very cautious in saying because is it just in the realm of your energy of possibility? But in that moment, I felt it like so strong, like this is soon. And 2 months later, she was pregnant and she did have a girl. But when it comes to people's passing, I have actually not perceived that. And to be honest with you, I wouldn't want to. That's too heavy of a responsibility.
Mm, yeah, I agree. I picked up on that for two people. I didn't say anything because I didn't feel like it was my place, and it would be very awkward, to tell somebody that. And
Yeah.
and I didn't understand because this was at the beginning of my journey, and I'm like, well, why am I getting this? How do I know this? And I was trying to. It was like an exploration in a sense. I'm like,
Yeah.
maybe that's just my mind because I didn't understand it either. But yeah, it's like a journey, to try to understand these things. But I feel like we do have to have like ethics and morals
Yeah.
and look at things, not just like blurt out things, because just
Right.
because we know it doesn't mean we should share it.
Yeah, for sure. And even that was a part of my journey in the beginning because, again, I wasn't trying to be a medium, but I would have these experiences. And so I would have to wrestle with what do I do with this? Um, Even sometimes maybe a loved one would kind of become present with me in a meditation I was having, and they're a loved one for an acquaintance, someone I don't even know very well, that I don't even know if would be open to mediumship. That doesn't happen so much to me now, once in a great while, but in the beginning it had to because it was the dangling of the carrots. I know she'll follow this path if we do this. And so we have to be really careful how we reach out to people. And a good way that I came to feel okay with it was that I would reach out to someone and say, I feel that I perceived your loved one. And then I don't just blurt out the message. I ask, would you like to hear it? Because
Mhm.
then you're giving them the right to say yes or no. And this is a very personal aspect to people's worldview, so we really have to honor that.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that you said that. So that's definitely, a great thing to put in place,
Yeah,
if we're going to do the work, mediumship or any kind of spiritual work, because we have to honor the other person.
Yeah.
So I want to kind of go shift into like the death doula or the end of life coach that you do. Now, do you actually sit with people at the end of life, or how does the end of life coaching work for you?
So the end of life coaching, while it can include actually sitting with people at the end of life, it's really way more than that. It's how we holistically prepare for a sacred passing. So, in end of life coaching, we kind of work together most typically over the course of about 8 weeks, sometimes six, sometimes as much as 10. And there are five domains in which we're really preparing for a passing: practical, physical. So those are the two most what we think in human form. What do I want? How much control do I want to have? All those kinds of things. But then we have emotional, spiritual, and mental um, kind of support and what that looks like. And what we do is we create sort of a map together and an action plan of preparing for your wholeness to be honored, for your life to feel like there's closure. We do that all together on this map so that you can share it with family and friends and really have a very holistic plan as you approach your passing. I would have never guessed to feel like I feel now, which is that death is such just literally quite a sacred transition, just like birth. Prior to my dad's passing, I was terrified. I suffered so much more leading up to his passing than in the actual moments of his passing and after, because I was so afraid of suffering, so afraid of the loss of control. Um, and I saw it with such like finality as this is an end. And actually, during his passing, I started to intuitively have this feeling. This is not an end. I intuitively felt in a very odd way, without making the choice, that I was kind of there to help him pass with peace and kind of be a facilitator in some way of his own journey. And after he passed, and with my shared death experience, and then all of my kind of guided awakening journey with him, I really came to see death as something that is truly a sacred transition. And it made me reflect on how poorly we prepare as a culture, because it's not an end and it's not a finality at all. And I really want to support people with that kind of narrative that plays in our minds around this being an end, this being scary, this being something awful. It doesn't have to be that way. That being said, I want to honor there absolutely are people that don't get to experience a type of beautiful sacred transition, even when it's sad. There's tragedy, there's abruptness. And so I just say that out of a moment of empathy and honor. For those I have learned, their transition is still sacred in its own immediate way. Um, but especially for many that, you know, pass just from elderly years or pass from terminal illness, there's so much we can do to prepare ourselves to truly pass with peace. And
Mm-hmm.
so the end of life coaching really supports someone through that process.
Beautiful. I Last year I was guided into deaf doula, and so I took a course on that, and so I've incorporated a few things, for that. So I'm going in that direction. Now, with your end of life coaching, do you bring in mediumship into that?
It's a great question. I have a couple of times, but only when it's been asked for. It's not really the intent. But of course, many people will know or see that I'm a medium as a part of that. And they've, it's been a part of like their own emotional preparation, right? Maybe having a mediumship session and knowing that their loved ones are there and so on and so forth. And then it kind of has that extra peace of mind. Sometimes people want to be able to pass that type of experience onto their own family members, just to kind of, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, put the plug that there's more, right? But not always. Some people really are approaching it from that very human perspective, but wanting to be more prepared.
Mhm. Now, have you worked with people that are like have Alzheimer's and don't remember? And like, what is your clientele, when you are doing that?
Yeah, I haven't worked with someone as a mediumship client that has had Alzheimer's or in the end of life coaching space. However, I've had numerous mediumship sessions where the client's loved one, most often parent, has Alzheimer's and maybe isn't even passed on. And I absolutely connected with them. Kind of, because we're all souls. We're not just souls when we die, we're souls now. And so there are aspects of us at that essence that are kind of already a part of the greater reality. That's true for you and me sitting here right now. And of course, is true for those, for in this case, for example, that have Alzheimer's. So I
Mhm.
have connected with people that have Alzheimer's. Absolutely.
Okay.
Actually, one of those sessions is kind of what shoved me into this space of not hiding mediumship anymore. I can't not do this for people. And I was having a mediumship session, and at that time, they were just like practices because I was still sort of figuring out if I could even, okay, now I recognize I'm a medium, but I can't be a medium. That was kind of the space I was in. And so I was still exploring everything. And I had sort of this practice session with this woman that I did not know, who was from California. And as I was sitting in my heart connection, all of a sudden I felt this woman come into my awareness. And I said, she's super petite and she's got lots of little shopping bags and she's shuffling along. I know she's like got her nice little cute presentable clothes and she's shuffling along with all her shopping bags. And she was showing me a Virgin Mary statue with art utensils at its feet. And I paused and the client said, well, this sounds exactly like my aunt. She is super petite and she loves shopping, and that's so her, like shuffling along. And she paints Virgin Mary statues for a hobby and just gives them to people. But she is not passed on. She has Alzheimer's and she's living in a long-term care facility. And that was the first time I had experienced something where I was connecting with someone that is kind of technically still here in their physical body. And I asked her, well, this is fascinating. Do you mind if we proceed? And she said, yeah, sure, no problem. And this woman kept doing this in my mind's eye, like she's lifting up a blanket and she was helping me feel I'm missing my blanket. I want my blanket. And then she showed me a stuffed animal and she was holding it real dear like this. And it was just, I came with a knowing I'm missing my stuffed animal and my things aren't quite in place. I relayed all this to her. And then all of a sudden, I felt this man come into my awareness, and he was real manly. And I could feel like I wanted to walk like this. And I could tell he's got a real broad chest and a deep voice. And I said to her, I don't know why, but he's wearing high heels and a dress, and he's going, ha, 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 ha. And she started laughing. And she said, that's my uncle. He is passed on. It's the woman with Alzheimer's, her brother. He passed away, but right before he passed away at the last family party, he put on little like high heels and a skirt over his clothes and imitated his sister, the one with Alzheimer's, parading around with all her shopping bags. Well, he was here to escort her home. He was here to just help me understand that he was here for love and support and help. He didn't say, I'm here to escort her home, but I realized that later. He he was here to say how much he's caring for his sister and loving her and supporting her and all the things. Well, when we got off that practice session, she called me a few hours later, right after we hung up. The care facility had called her family and said, we think your aunt's passing away soon. You might want to come. And when they got there, she was missing her things. She was missing her blanket. She had a special blanket that had a big picture of the Virgin Mary on it. She was missing it, and she was missing her stuffed animal. And they were able to go find them. They found them folded in a laundry closet room somewhere. And the aunt passed away that evening. And when she relayed all this to me, it brought up all the feelings I had of being with my dad at his passing, and just how important it is that at the end of life, we simply have comfort. We have the things that we like, right? We have our blanket that makes us feel comfortable. We have family. We're just comforted and surrounded by love. And I had to take the day off work the next day. I had my normal full-time job in education, and I had to take the day off work just to sit in the profoundness of what I had just experienced. Not only the fact that we were connecting with someone that was technically still in a physical body, but second, that in some way we all kind of supported her sacred passing. And it's when I knew I can't not do this for people. I can't not be a medium. Now, not every session is that profound, but every session pretty much is kind of profound in its own way, you know? Um, it was such a beautiful moment. And that's really when I said, I'm a medium and this is what I'm gonna do with my life.
Hmm. Thank you for sharing that. I think that speaks volumes because I know like when our body is breaking down and we're coming to the end of life and things don't work as they're supposed to, we kind of get caught up in that suffering, whether we are that person or a loved one, because we don't understand what's beyond that.
Oh yeah, I'm so
Right.
glad you
So
said that.
we don't
Yeah.
look at, oh, well, this isn't an end, this is a transition, it's a sacred passage. They're more than the condensed form, though we love the condensed form, right? So we are the soul that is beyond that, right? So we're much more than just the body. And I think that's important to recognize, in certain situations, whether we're autistic and we can't communicate, or we have some kind of physical ailment, or we have Alzheimer's and we're getting ready to transition. We are so much more than the physical limitations
Yeah,
that we went
absolutely.
through.
Thank you for
Mhm.
sharing that.
You're welcome. Now, have you were able to experience any loved ones coming in as people were passing, or has that not been in your experience yet?
You mean loved ones for me?
So like the person, if you're sitting in a end of life um, with a client, have you noticed? Because within near death experiences, we talk
Oh, okay.
about
Yeah.
the loved ones coming. Have you had that experience when they were going through it?
Yeah. I haven't, but that's probably in part because a lot of my end of life coaching is a part of that preparation, not in part because I work with people all over the world, right? And so a lot of my kind of doula end of life work is around all of this kind of holistic preparation piece. Um, I've had a number of mediumship sessions where someone I didn't know was coming to this session because their loved one is in hospice. And in that situation, yes, have connected with people. Um, but a part of when I'm sitting with someone like at the end of life in a physical kind of doula way, I'm not my goal, or at least my intention, is not to necessarily try to facilitate experiences, but to really facilitate kind of their piece and their process. Um, I hope that answers your question.
Yep, yep, definitely. Now, in one of your videos and your interviews, you talked about a letter that you got from your father, and I think this is really important
Yeah.
to share. Would you mind sharing that for the audience or whoever watches it?
Yeah, I do. I just have to grab it. Hold on
Okay,
1 second and I'll grab it.
all right.
Okay, I have it framed now, so I'm gonna have to read it to you. So, in those initial months after his passing, I was often having such strong, very felt experiences of him, and this was probably the top of the most profound. And he really did dictate a letter to me. Actually, he dictated it to all of us. Part of it's me, but it's also just a message to humans in life. I want to start with the evidence. When I was done with this, I asked him, okay, Dad, that was so strong that I kind of don't even need to know that was you, but I need to know it was you. Give me some evidence. How can I know this is you? And he put a picture of an orange in my mind and gave me the thought, check your email. My dad used to send me before he died all these silly videos, and I didn't watch them all because I wanted to have emails still to open after he passed. So all I did was I went into my email and I typed in the search orange. And a subject line came up that was still in bold that I'd never opened, and it was titled How an Artist Peels an Orange. Oh, and when he put that orange in my mind, the other image that he put in my mind was a cowboy saddle. So it was an orange and a cowboy saddle. And the title of the video was How an Artist Peels an Orange. I had never watched this because I had held on to a lot of emails on purpose. When I opened that video, it was an artist like peeling a little small mandarin orange. And when he was all done with his peeling, it was a horse. That's what the whole peel shape was. That was so fun. Such a fun piece of evidence. But here is the letter. Hello, my story isn't finished. In a way, it's just getting started. Do you know those Jack in the Box? That's me. Surprise! Like popping out. Here I am, right? I want you to know Amber is typing this, but my thoughts are being shared. We are figuring this out together. Here goes. Life is hard. There are regrets. My brother, the way I treated my wife. No, wives. But life is more than the regrets. It's all the good stuff in between. The camping, the laughing, good food and drink, music, riding, love, and children. They might be the best part. Be strong for each other. Don't screw up your family. Have the heart to say how you really feel. Laugh together, sing together. Always tell them how you feel. My heart was a little rough, a little hardened. Keep yours soft and open. Share your feelings freely. You will be so surprised once you're here. It's a joy, but life is so special and it's important to live it. What does that mean? To feel love. Remember me this way, the man who learned from his daughter what it means to love. I'm sorry for all the pain I caused. I am so sorry. I wish I could do it over. But it was good to hold on to that part. The rest is just lessons. The love is endless.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I think that may give people maybe hope, and understanding, that, this isn't the end. It's just part of the life that we're going through. So that was very beautiful. And I know, like, with the near death experience, I had a near death experience. So a lot of it is love. The love that is beyond is just amazing. Like, you just can't even put it into words. So there's so much more beyond than here. And we do go through the hardships. We talk about how we choose them, our life lessons, the purpose and reasons why we're here. So,
Absolutely. Thank you so
mhm.
much.
Yeah. And lastly, here, before we bring it into a close, would you want to see if there is a message from someone from beyond? Maybe the direction that we're going on, or something somebody might need to hear.
Well, let me end with this because if I could, it is from spirit. It's just not from spirit in the moment, but if I could boil down to one sentence what spirit most wants us to know, it's this. You are already whole, already divine, and already worthy. You don't have to prove yourself to anyone. You are already divine. already whole, already worthy. You are loved and supported, even when it's unrecognizable to your heart.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. Anything else you would like to share that we haven't covered?
No, I just would share that I love my mediumship work with people and in my end of life coaching. So I would love to meet new listeners. Thank you.
Okay. Now, where can everybody find you if they wanted to get your coaching or mediumship session?
My website is www.natureswayopen.com.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for joining us, Amber. It was great having you. Great
Thanks for
meeting you.
having me. Yeah, you too, Laura.
You're welcome.